So hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for stopping by. This is our weekly Wednesday night stream. We did an extra stream last night to talk about the primary results live as they were coming in. But tonight we're going to just kind of be breaking those down. We'll rip on Tim Pool for a little bit because he was the guy who made many videos, seemingly all of them with hundreds of thousands of views, convinced that AOC was going to lose her primary challenge. I'm sure we're going to get questions about issues around policing. We have all of these things we can certainly talk about, but I think the main story, is going to be talking about AOC, Jamaal Bowman, and Mondaire Jones winning their seats, and they're all in very safe blue ridings. So, they're effectively going to be congressmen and a congresswoman in November. The primary is the real election in these sorts of districts. So this is fantastic news. These are people that have been endorsed by folks like Bernie and the Bernie Sanders movement and people like AOC and the squad. And it's fantastic to see. And really, all of their results were pretty decisive, right? Like, AOC won more than 70% of the vote, it looks like. Mondaire, that was a more divided race. There was a lot of strong candidates, but he, I think, was winning by more than 20 points over second place. And Jamaal Bowman, I think the results will narrow a bit, but last night was leading with over 60% of the vote. Mm-hmm. And so, like, these are three decisive wins, right? Like, no flukes, no very, very close results, and you wonder why that is. There are three decisive wins, and it should be remembered that we're also dealing with Charles Booker in Kentucky, and Charles Booker is currently behind by a few thousand votes, but basically the two biggest cities in Kentucky, Lexington and Louisville, have not had basically no votes come in. Mm-hmm. And that's where a large contingent of the black population in Kentucky live. And that's where a lot of the progressive people in Kentucky live, of all races. Like, often urban areas vote more progressive. And so, with that in mind, he can easily close that few thousand vote 6-point gap. It's not a guarantee he will. We don't know for sure. But I think there's a chance that he could reel Amy McGrath in and win that nomination. And it's going to be a challenge to defeat Mitch McConnell in the general election, but it's not impossible given how badly the Republicans are polling, and the fact that the Democrats have proven they can win a statewide election in Kentucky. They did it in 2019 for the governor's race. Mm-hmm. So we'll talk about a little bit of that stuff. Obviously, we have lots of questions and comments. Some of these were left earlier when we started because they had comments from the beginning. But if you want to get in some of them.
Super chats.
Yeah, we'll get to those for sure.
Do you want to put your thing on?
Oh, yes, for sure.
And are you done your introduction?
Well, we'll get into some, but
that was less than 20 minutes, so I don't know.
People come here for the conversation.
Which is you talking to yourself. Okay. Super chat. Samantha Sider says, need to see your victory dance for the Bowman win with a little salsa dancer. No, you actually don't. He's a terrible dancer. Wouldn't even dance at our wedding.
I danced at our wedding. Okay, wait. I'm gonna do a little dance. Okay.
Negative.
Yeah, I'm gonna do just.
No,
yeah.
I will. No, that is so embarrassing. Oh my god, I can't even deal with this.
Okay, so that's my dance. I could lie and say that that I'm just it's the space, but I'm not a very good dancer. Brianna's biggest fear is that our son will dance like I do.
One of them.
He'll be like, and she'll be like, oh, that's awful.
Okay, next super chat.
Yeah.
All my lettuce, thank you so much for your support. It says, Christo, you have to show a Smokey today. I pay you $5.
Okay, all my lettuce, that's perfectly reasonable. He did briefly show up last night, and he was whining for food because we went a little bit later covering the results. So he was like, feed me. And so somebody's like, your kid's crying.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So
Lisa Hildebrandt is on my side. She says, "Make the dancing stop." I tried.
So-
Tried. Everyone.
okay.
I tried.
Okay, well, I'm happy. It was a great result. Jamaal Bowman himself had a video of him dancing, much better dancer than I am. But I'm very happy.
Okay. And Bobby Hill says with the super chat, "Look, Dad, I'm a socialist."
Bwah!
Is that Bobby Hill, like from King of the Hill?
Yeah. So I just did the Hank like horrified voice where he's like, "Bwah!" I don't know if that's good or not. But no, the whole point of, we talked a bit about the politics of King of the Hill. They're all basically Republicans. And in a really, like in an episode from 2000, the whole thing is that they're all clearly going to vote for George Bush, against Al Gore. But Hank gets second thoughts when George Bush's handshake is limp. Mm-hmm. And then Luann is voting for the Communist Party. Yes.
So Joseph Mangano says, "As Christo dances, I'm not sure Brianna doesn't just up and walk away." It was close.
Well, guys,
it was close. Oh my God, Christo dancing the Napoleon Dynamite dance would be awkward and cool.
I don't have the body for it, right? Like the whole point of the Napoleon Dynamite dance is that like the guy. What? By the way, what's up with the guy that played Napoleon Dynamite? Is he still around? I don't know.
He crashed his sports car.
Oh, did he? Is he dead?
No, he's not dead.
Okay.
Because
I would feel really bad if I was like, "What's he doing?" So basically, I'm not gangly. The whole point is that's a gangly guy dance. I'm like a short and stocky guy.
Oh, gosh. Dan Cordovan wants to know why Brenda Luckty is still commissioner of the RCMP.
I mean, look, that your viewpoint is as good as mine. So for those who don't know, Luckty is the commissioner of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. They're what you might, the Mounties. A lot of Americans know they don't all dress like that and ride horses. That's a ceremonial thing, more or less now. But they're basically our version of the FBI. They're a federal police. They deal with federal crimes. They're sort of subcontracted out to municipalities and provinces, except for Ontario and Quebec. And basically, she was asked, do you think there's systematic discrimination, racism in the RCMP? And she was basically like trying to skirt the question. She's like, there's so many definitions of that term, but clearly, there are systematic issues of discrimination, of prejudice against minorities, but especially Black and Indigenous Canadians, right? Like especially. And we've been seeing that. Again, it's not exclusive. It's not that police are peachy keen to everybody, but specifically, as Jagmeet Singh has been noting, as Matthew Green has been noting, NDP MPs as Black leaders in Black Lives Matter and Indigenous leaders in Canada have been noting, the police do not treat Canadians the same, regardless of their race or their ethnic background. And that's not just the RCMP, to be clear, but the RCMP specifically as a force has come under scrutiny because it is the federal police, and it is also, at the center of a few recent cases where they did quote unquote mental health checks that led to police taking innocent people's lives. Mm-hmm. No.
Joseph Mangano says one of the candidates in a nearby riding, he must be using our language. Yeah. A nearby riding got endorsed by both Bernie and somebody. Sorry, give me 1 sec. Bernie and Ania Presley, hoping for an upset for Artie Kirbach. Arati Kirbach, right here.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Joseph is making the joke there with the riding comment, which is like what we call districts in Canada. So often when I talk about your guys' politics, I'll say like, oh, and AOC's riding, it's a pretty safe blue riding, and she's going to be strong there. But you guys use districts. But I mean, I'm hoping. Yeah. I agree with you, Joseph, and I think it's good to see some progressive unity. Again, I still think Warren acted a bit serpentinely during part of the primary process, and I've not forgiven her. but I do think it's important that the Warren wing and the Bernie wing can get together and endorse some progressive candidates from time to time. So, for instance, both of those camps endorsed Jamaal Bowman against Elliot Engel. People wanted to see Smokey. Here he is. Say hi, Smokey. Hi.
Okay, put him over in his spot and he can lie there.
Oh, Smokey, go in your spot and you can. He might try to go behind the computer though. Yeah.
Fine. Let him go.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's good. So I think it's good when the Warren camp and the Bernie camp can get together. Now, there's going to be distinctions. I know Warren has endorsed Hickenlooper over Romanoff, and to be clear, I don't think Bernie has made an endorsement there, and he should endorse Romanoff for the Colorado Senate seat. But yeah, I think it's I'd like to see some more progressive upsets.
Okay, super chat.
Yeah, of course.
Maria Vargad says, "What do you think of Noam Chomsky saying he's voting for Biden?" Really?
Yeah. So Noam Chomsky and a lot of other big names on the left have said they're voting for Joe Biden. I believe didn't Chomsky say he was also voting for Hillary? This is something Chomsky has done. Chomsky is a believer in lesser evil voting, like strategic voting, harm reduction voting. And I can respect that opinion. And I can also respect the opinion that Joe Biden is, in many ways, whether it's personally, ideologically, in terms of his historical vision, the things he's done as vice president and as a senator, that Joe Biden is not something somebody can vote for. So the way I've always put it, in some ways, has been, Joe, if you want to go vote for Joe Biden, because he's not Donald Trump and he's not going to be as bad as Trump, and on a few things he might ever so slightly do decent, fine. I welcome that opinion and I respect that opinion. But when you have Joe Biden basically saying that Trump is too soft on Maduro and Venezuela, and I'm going to be even more, coup friendly than Trump, and watch me take out socialist leaders in Latin America, I'll do it more than Trump. When I read that, one, if I was an American, I'd be less likely to vote for Biden. I'm not saying I'd have 100% either way, but in good conscience, I cannot get mad at anyone that says they're not voting for Biden. I'll get mad at people that say they're voting for Trump. Voting for Trump's awful. Don't vote for Trump. But if anybody's like, hey, can't vote for Biden, his position on foreign affairs, or his position on Medicare, or his legacy with Tara Reid and other women, any or all of these things, what can I say to that person but, hey, I respect your opinion. Best of luck, right? You know what I mean? You're voting Howie Hawkins. You're writing somebody in. You're voting none of the above. You're going to go vote for a down ballot person because you like them, but you're not going to vote for, you're going to leave the presidential ballot blank. What can I say? Right? So, again, on my channel, and this is something I've done, I've been very critical of Trump. I've made it very clear that no one should be voting for Trump, but I have never, ever, ever told people, and I won't, that you have to vote for Biden, that you're a bad person if you're a bad person if you're not voting for Biden. Nor have I said that, hey, if you vote for Biden, you're a dirty, rotten sheep and you're betraying progressives. It's just not an issue to worry about. What this last couple hours, what the last day has taught us, is that there's still progressive victories to be had that, frankly, have nothing to do with Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden, right? Not me, us. And not me, us is not just, the people can make their own decisions, but there's more progressive races beyond Bernie that include AOC and Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and also new people now like Mondaire Jones and Jamaal Bowman, right? That's what it's about. Yeah.
Okay. And on that note, a good day for progressives. John Barlich with the super chat says, yesterday was a good day for progressives.
John, thanks so much for stopping by and for the support. No, you're right, 100%. It was a very good day. A lot of other wins and even some other candidates. We were having a debate in in the stream about Suraj Patel. Like, is he a progressive? He wasn't endorsed by Bernie, but he's like a young racialized candidate taking out, or nearly taking out. That one's going to come down to the absentee ballots. Yeah. A long established like corporate Democrat in Maloney. And so it might not even always be the case that, you know, left wingers are winning, but if you're taking out basically Republicans and replacing them with slightly left of center people, that's still a good result. So even beyond the big names like Bowman, Jones, AOC, maybe Booker in Kentucky, there were other results that were at least somewhat positive.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Ida Martinez doesn't say have a question or anything, but sends a super chat with a little what is that called? A thumbs up pear.
Yeah, pear giving a thumbs up. I love it. I love him.
Okay, so we have some questions here. So mostly around the elections that are happening. So Dan Cordovan says Charles Booker is narrowing the lead. Peggy Russell says Louisville only has one polling station confirmed, ?
Yeah, I mean, the reality with Louisville is that, okay, to be clear, more people than normal voted absentee in Kentucky. It's one of the reasons why we don't have results from last night. But frankly, what we saw in Louisville was a travesty. Louisville's a large city. It's hundreds of thousands of people. It's a big city. And to have one polling station effectively in Louisville for all these voters is voter disenfranchisement, and that will disproportionately hit black voters. And the polling stations closed at 6.
Yeah, that was
Now, and I think that might actually be the status quo in Kentucky. Correct me if I'm wrong. Some states have these like 6 o'clock, 6:30 closing times. That's voter disenfranchisement too. And they actually tried last night. We covered it on stream. That they tried to lock the doors and tell everybody who was in line to go home. Now, we all know that no matter how late it is, if you're in line, this is the same thing in Canada too. When the polls close, it doesn't matter if it takes hours, you can still vote. You can still vote. They'll close the polls, they'll start the counting, but they'll let everybody in line finish. They tried to kick people out waiting to vote last night. They tried to do that.
Why are you?
No, that's right.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
Is that the end of your answer?
No. And so basically, they tried to disenfranchise people. And again, one of the arguments we've heard is that, less people will be voting in person. And that's true. But again, one of the arguments I've heard is, well, less people are voting in person, and so we need less stations. But one thing we know with the current crisis is that density of people is a bad thing. Mm-hmm. People should not congregate in large groups, right? Like that's why even as some things have started to reopen, like sports games haven't yet, right? Like they haven't. Like stadiums have not opened yet. Big fairs are not open yet, at least in non-crazy parts of the world, right? And so, putting everyone into one polling station is the exact opposite. They should have kept more polling stations open. Maybe even open up extra polling stations so that voters would never have to worry about waiting in big, long lines in big groups of people.
I've never waited to vote.
We're very lucky. And
even if you go at peak time.
Yeah, some people have noted, we were talking about this last night, it's some parts of Canada, very busy polling stations. You go right after work on voting day, you might have to wait an hour or so. But that's Brianna and I, last time we voted, it took about 10 minutes.
Yeah, and that's what the girls in front of them couldn't find their
address.
Yeah,
and that was like people fiddling with their addresses and their IDs and things like that, yeah. So it took 10 minutes, really. And that was for Bri and I to both vote. We had our son with us, so we were fumbling around with the stroller. And so all of that, it took 10 minutes.
We weren't fumbling. We stopped for photos.
Well, that was... I got to get some water. I'm gulping a lot.
Why can't you prepare before we go on stream?
I don't know.
I'll just sit here. Don't worry.
I need some water. Okay. So.
Time management.
Basically, like, yeah, Kentucky was a mess. And if Booker ends up losing by a close amount, the reason is going to be voter disenfranchisement. 100%. No.
Okay. Papa Wheeler says Papa Wheelie says you are super knowledgeable about American politics. Have you always been in Canada, or did you start in the U.S.?
No, I've always lived in Canada. I grew up in New Brunswick, which is on the East Coast, close to Maine, and then I moved to Ontario to do my graduate work. But I've never not lived in Canada, and I've actually spent very little time in the United States, like physically. But the reality about Canada is we are inundated with American news, right? We get all of the news stations, we get all of the American television from a cultural perspective. All of our movies, video games, books, everything is American. And so we're part of that same cultural bubble. And the reality, in addition, is that even when you talk about Canadian politics, like, the decisions you guys make have massive social, political, diplomatic, economic effects on Canada, right? So when the United States elects a new president, it's going to have a major effect, positive or negative, on Canada. What about our trade? What about, how they will maybe drag us into conflicts in Latin America or other parts of the world? Will a good president actually help improve labor standards in the United States, which helps Canada?
Well, that's the one thing that Biden might do, right, is kind of like gut right to work.
I mean, I'm skeptical, but there's a chance. But what I think Biden will do is I think he will move towards a much higher federal minimum wage. I do think. Yeah. I don't think Biden's lying. I think Biden would move to, maybe he doesn't even get to 15, but he like the U.S. federal minimum wage is 7 something. That's going up if the Democrats win. I do believe that. Probably not enough, but it's going up. The point is, like, the decisions you guys make matter to us way more than the decisions we make matter to you. And Canadian policy does matter to the United States. We are a smaller country, but we still have an impact. The point is,
single largest trading partner.
Yeah, we're your single largest trading partner, and you're our single largest trading partner, but you form over half of our trade, whereas we're like 20% of your trade.
Except we have all our oil.
Well, yeah, we have a lot of natural resources. The point is, like, most Canadians that are interested in politics generally have a strong interest and knowledge base of American politics. You sort of have to. Mm-hmm. You sort of have to. And it's like the same thing in in Canada, like, minority populations, like the smaller population always has to know stuff about the bigger population, and the inverse isn't true. It's why, and you go to a lot of places, more francophones in Canada speak English per capita than anglophones speak French.
Yep.
Just, you have to learn the main language. You don't have to learn the secondary language.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have some super chats that have come in, but before we do that, it was Alan Wallace's birthday a couple days ago, and he's been trying to say hi to us.
Alan, thank you so much, and happy birthday.
Yeah, he's 22.
22?
Apparently.
God, that is so young.
I know, I'm like, oh, baby.
Oh, that is so young.
Okay.
God, that's, yeah. I remember being 22. Not really.
I'm like, do you?
Yeah.
That was a while ago.
Yeah.
So, Alan, let us know what you did for your birthday. That would be kind of nice.
Yeah.
Okay. So we do have a super chat. So from John Barlich, and he says, hey, are there any notable progressives that are running in primaries that we should pay attention to? That's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, there are lots. Obviously, like, Rashida Tlaib apparently might have a bit of a tough primary. And so I think she's going to hold on. But apparently, Tim Pool was going on and on about how, like, AOC, it was going to lose. But there are some concerns Rashida Tlaib might lose her primary. She was dealing with a split field last time, running in a largely African-American district. And this time, They're running sort of one major corporate Democrat challenger who is African American. There's worries that it could be difficult for her. But there's also Shahid Buttar. That's a big one. That's not a primary. That's going to November. But effectively what it is we've talked about it before. In California, the top two candidates in the primary, regardless of party, go to the finals, if you will, in November, even if they're both Democrats or both Republicans. So in Pelosi's district, she's facing a one-on-one challenge with Shahid Buttar. Now, the polling right now shows that he's got a lot of room to make up. But there's a long time between now and November. That's a big one I'm looking at. There's people are talking about Tim Pool, ripping Tim Pool. Well, I'm not watching Tim Pool so much, but like there's been a lot of discussion on social media about how like, you know, the guy is the grifter in the worst kind of sense. So, for instance, he was saying for weeks now, and again, some of these videos getting 100,000 and more views, saying like, hey, like AOC is going to lose her primary, right? She's going to lose her primary, and this means that the left has been defeated, and the queen of the left is going to be, you know, dethroned, and we're going to watch a big leftist meltdown on Twitter and whatever. And then that didn't happen.
To be fair, a leftist meltdown on Twitter, there's like none entertainment better.
Yeah, well, yeah, but that's our thing. You can't be doing that from outside the community. But the thing is that today on social media, it was like, well, no one really actually expected her to lose. So he's that kind of person that will take these kind of things, and then when it doesn't go his way, he'll pretend that he never believed in that thing at all. So, for instance, he was also one of these people. Remember Shake Shack? You remember that last week, guys, where the police went to Shake Shack? And then they got the food, and then the union put out this report that the workers were tampering with the police's food, and then they were seeking medical attention, and then it came out that it was actually an accident, and then it came out again that not only there wasn't an accident, the police officers weren't ever sick at all, and it was all a big lie by the cops. And then so Tim Pool was like, oh my God, these service workers are going after our boys in blue. God, the leftists. And then once the story finally broke, he's like, oh yeah, media with blue checks were being really irresponsible, tweeting stories without confirmation. Tim Pool has a blue check and describes himself as a quote-unquote journalist. So he was like, oh, these irresponsible journalists peddling fake stories about Shake Shack.
Yeah, not me though.
Not me though.
Yeah. Okay. So we have another super chat. Aspie for Peace says 5 active cases in Kingston since Sunday. More cases possible. Of course, he's talking about the pandemic.
Okay. Yeah. So for the lore of the channel is that Aspie for Peace lives in the same town Brianna and I do. And one thing is that we're starting a gradual reopening in Ontario. We're calling it stage 2, I think, or phase 2.
Phase 2.
And basically it's a minor reopening. A lot of smaller businesses can reopen. You know, people are allowed to gather in groups of 10 or less, like outside of their immediate family. Like your total bubble, including family and friends, can be 10 people.
10, yeah.
So there's a bit more leeway now. Kingston in particular was doing very well. I think at one point we had no new cases in a few weeks. But I think the reality is that with a partial reopening and with, you know, the fact is you can't build a border on the city limits of Kingston, like whether people are coming from Toronto or Ottawa or anywhere else, we were bound to get a few more cases. And I know we've heard some, we have friends that work in healthcare, public health, things like that. And so, yeah, we've heard these things. You know, on their own, 5 cases isn't anything to be concerned about yet, but I think this is why a gradual reopening was the path charted. And yeah, we like, and it's all sort of being made up as we go along. I mean, our childcare was they told childcare in Ontario that they could reopen about 3 days before they could, and no daycare was ready. And then even now, most daycares are like, we're not opening till August. Like, we're not ready to open. Even if the government says we legally can reopen, we are not ready. So it's, even in Kingston, a town that's done a really good job, a flare-up can happen.
I think still practice social distancing and keep doing the things that you were doing before to make sure that you and your family were safe.
Yep, Brianna's 100% right there. I mean, you can start to, now you could take precautions and hang out with friends a little bit more, but, maybe limit that to hanging out with people outside in backyards and things like that. Going to the park with small groups of friends with your kids maybe isn't a bad thing now, but, still be careful.
Social distance.
Yeah.
Okay, Phil Spargo says, good work and good analysis with the super chat. Well,
Phil, thank you so much. I really appreciate the comment and the support, and I hope you're doing well.
Okay, Facts for You says, Justice Democrats are here to stay, and they have the corporate Dems running scared. Yay.
Yeah, and that rhymed. I like that. That's like a nice little chant. Wait. Justice Dems are here to stay. Corporate Dems keep running away.
Are we really singing and dancing in the same stream?
Yeah. Well, in any case, yeah, you're right. Look, we have to temper expectations a little bit. Like, it's a great night, and there's nothing to I don't want to downplay that by any means. But there is something to be said for, like, there's 435 seats in the House, and how many of those, even defining progressive broadly, are held by progressives? Maybe 20, 25, and that's defining it pretty broadly, including more Warren-type Democrats, right? Like, so we're not there yet, but you're right. There's this prediction of, like, people like AOC, being a congresswoman for 2 years and then disappearing. Mm-hmm. It's not happening. AOC is one of the biggest fundraisers in the Congress, and she does it off, like, small donations. She is already an international political celebrity. She's one of the most influential people in the Congress in terms of her ability to project a message and an idea. And she's not even 30 yet, right? Or she's barely 30, I'm not sure. And she's not even done her first term. She's still technically, like, she'll start her second term, in January, November, whatever. She is still technically a rookie congresswoman. Yeah.
Question.
Yeah.
Has AOC replaced Nikki Ashton as your political crush?
I don't have political crushes, babe. I have political admirations.
All right, fine. Tanzer says, question, you don't have to answer. Do you have opinions about combs?
What, like hair combs?
Yeah, like hair combs.
No, not really. I
might be making this worse.
I let my hair grow wild and free like the stallions on the plains.
Just stop. Hold on. Yeah. Is that better?
I need a haircut, but the barber shops are not open yet. People are saying I think she just turned 30. Now I think Peggy Russell, one of our channel members, if you see these people, they got the schnazzy little circles next to their name, their badges, and the YouTube helps it shows me their comments when people leave them. If you want to become a channel member, it's sort of like Patreon on YouTube. You can click that little join button. It's as little as $1 a month, basically 99 cents a month. But Peggy has a really good question we should probably talk about. In Hamilton, last week.
Are you going to read that?
Yeah. So Peggy says, can we discuss for a few minutes what happened in Hamilton with the HWDSB this week? Is this the beginning of the defunding police? And so what happened there is, and this is not something that they've just started. This is something local activists have been fighting for years now, is to remove police officers from schools. Mm-hmm. So I know this is a thing in the United States too. It is in Canada, where in some parts of the country, in some provinces, in some communities, there are police in the schools. What do they call them? Resource officers?
Yeah, support officers.
Yeah, support officers. But and I know the narrative is they're there to help students, quote unquote, but especially in poor and racialized and immigrant communities, they are seen by a lot of people in these communities as there to spy on and surveil children. And basically they act as a disruption to the educational process and not as an enhancement to it. And so in Hamilton, the city council voted to end not the city council, the school board voted to end the officer resource program, basically removing police from school. And I don't know if that's going to be like the first domino in a long chain, Peggy. Like, I'm not sure. But it is part of that process of defunding police. Because we have to be clear. Defunding doesn't necessarily mean, at least in the short term, like abolishment of police. It doesn't necessarily have to mean that. It doesn't also have to mean anything immediate, even if you do believe in ultimately getting rid of police. Defunding police is about removing aspects of police power and shifting that power and the resources to different people better suited to help the folks that need help. So, just for instance, and you can go, David Dole did a couple videos on this at the Rational National. There was a young woman at the University of British Columbia who was was having a mental health crisis episode, and the police were called to do a quote unquote wellness check. And it ended up with her being like dragged on the floor and the police officer, putting their foot on the person's head. And it's not the worst we've seen in the last couple weeks, to be clear. But it was an example for a lot of people of how these quote unquote wellness checks, are being done by police. And police are like hammers, right? Even if you're charitable and you think you need that hammer, a hammer will think of every problem as a nail. Mm-hmm. And the solution is to hammer it in. And so whether it's, somebody clearly aggressive, or whether it's somebody who's having mental health issues, police will approach it with the fundamentally same approach. And that's what we saw in
Maritimes.
In the Maritimes with Chantal Moore, and then also I want to get the name right here, in the Greater Toronto area with Ejaz Ahmed Choudry, who basically was a racialized man in the outskirts of Toronto, who again was having one of these episodes and did not have arms, and his life was taken by police. Happened. These two events. The one from UBC, I think, has just been released because it's the subject of a civil case. But you're seeing this stuff, and so whether it's decriminalization, right? Whether it's like decriminalization to make it so that people don't have, aren't treated as bad for using certain recreational items. Or whether it's removing police from schools, or whether it's having mental health professionals, public health nurses, be the ones to respond to more of these wellness checks. These are all things that you're not even really getting rid of the police, but you're shrinking the footprint.
You're changing the scope
of of police, like the police's jurisdiction, and I think that's crucial.
Okay, are you ready for?
Yeah.
Super chat. Okay, Leslie Brown with the super chat says, "Hi guys, did you see David Sirota's article? The Supreme Court just gave corporations a license to steal. Kavanaugh just wrote a ruling authorizing corporations to steal retirement savings of millions of workers."
Yeah, yeah. I've seen the article. David Sirota is a progressive writer. Yeah, I've seen that argument, and it doesn't surprise me, Leslie. And thank you for the.
But what? How does that happen?
Well, basically works like it does in Canada, I assume, which is basically companies can avail, through things like that. They can basically
CCAA.
Yeah, and so I guess they're just confirming that through case law that they can steal from workers. We have the same issue in Canada, where a company will have pension and dental benefits and health benefit obligations to its existing and retired workers, and in some cases their spouses, whatever. And the company isn't actually in danger of going bankrupt, aka disappearing, but will say, we need to restructure either to sell or to be profitable.
It could be both.
Or it could be both. And in any case, what they'll do is they'll say, the only way we can operate is if you allow us to basically steal from our workers' pensions. Right? To basically say, we don't have to pay those workers anymore. We're availing ourselves of their health and dental and pension benefits. And
well, it's more likely that a company has actually filed for bankruptcy and are actually liquidating their assets. And when that happens in Canada under CCAA, workers are not in line until the very end. And so they don't receive the same money as, stock option holders do. They're not in the right category.
No, there's two cases. There's like the restructuring, but even in the restructuring cases, when the company is actually still operating, they will steal from the workers' pensions, right? They will steal from the workers' pensions. And so basically, Brianna's right though. So for instance, when Sears, was like in the States, a big box store, department store, all across Canada, been in Canada for a long time. When they went out of business, they paid huge stock bonuses, to all of their top executives and, middle, even like, corporate managers, what have you. Whereas workers basically had their pension slashed on the dollar. They lost 25, 30, 40% of their pensions, whatever. And that's perfectly legal because, again, when it comes to liabilities, bondholders get paid first and then pensioners are at the back of the line. Yeah. And so the end.
Just to clarify though, what happened with Sears is the situation that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Sears does not exist.
No, it doesn't
anymore.
But wasn't there the
same thing that happened with Stelco?
But then they got folded into Rio Tinto. So that was very clearly a restructure to flip for sale, wasn't it? Because like that Stelco got flipped into Rio Tinto, didn't it?
Well, Stelco no longer exists.
But the reason why Rio Tinto bought is because the liabilities of the asset.
Well, that's what happens when you go into bankruptcy.
Yes. So but say the Sears is gone and no one has taken over Sears.
And Stelco is gone. Rio Tinto bought what was left of Stelco in terms of their physical plant.
Yeah. But no one's bought anything from Sears. The point is that workers' pensions are being stolen. And I don't know if that's the exact ruling in the States, but that's what's happening in Canada.
Well, and the NDP is trying to stop that.
Yes.
With the pension theft.
Yeah, Scott Duvall, who's a member of Parliament from Hamilton Mountain?
Hamilton somewhere.
Yeah, he's from one of the ridings in Hamilton, where Matthew Green is from, friend of the channel. He's for a long time been championing putting workers further up the list of creditors when it comes to bankruptcies, so that pensions and dental benefits and medicine benefits are protected when companies go bankrupt, either for restructuring or or liquidation purposes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hamilton Mountain, Peggy Russell is saying.
Yeah.
So actually, let me pull that because Leslie, that's a good article. I think people should take a read of that. So let me see if I'm just going to copy the title here and let me see maybe if I can post a link in the description.
And I'm not sure Rio Tinto bought Stelco.
No?
No. I don't think they could get a buyer for it.
So here's the link. The first one that came up.
Link to Scott Duvall too.
Okay, let me.
For pension theft.
Well, yeah, I can.
Because it's literally something that could be changed by the Liberal government today, and they haven't done it. Yeah, there it is.
Okay, yes. So this is very clearly a federal government policy too, because bankruptcy proceedings, whether are federal in nature. So you can see Scott Duvall for Americans who maybe don't know, or Canadians who don't know. You can check those two things out. So,
okay. Ready for another question?
Yeah.
Are you?
Yeah.
Because you're not paying attention.
Yeah. Well, and this piece also notes, to be clear, I want to clarify, it's also, in this case, the plaintiffs were two retired employees of the bank who alleged that the company engaged in self-dealing and inappropriately investing workers' pension money in ways that allowed the bank executives to pay themselves excessive management fees, manipulate accounting rules, boost their reported income, inflate their stock prices, and exercise benefits. So basically what they were doing there is, in addition to what we've talked about, they can also basically your employer can make money off your your pension fund if they're also the investment bank.
Well,
That's
unless
legal.
you have a jointly sponsored pension plan, yes,
Yeah.
the employer can make all the decisions on your pension plan,
Yeah.
including investments and paying out executives.
Yeah, some guild unions, like they have like their own pension plans, right? Like
Some unions used to have pension plans, but they don't exist anymore.
no, but like the electrical workers, because they don't have employers, don't they all pay into an IE?
Might,
They have an
might.
IBW plan. But yeah, you're right. And so Scott, yeah, do check out Scott Duvall. It's a good source, and do read that article by David Sirota. And Leslie, thanks for bringing that up. I think a lot more people need to read it. Things are happening so fast right now that a lot of things are flying under the radar, even big things.
Well, and people should note that only 2% of like the Canadian working population have a jointly sponsored pension plan that's also
Defined benefit.
defined benefits.
Yeah.
DC.
Yeah, there's
DB.
yeah. Most pensions are defined contributions now. They're like 401ks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we have another super chat.
Yes. Yeah.
OPSU handles their own pension.
Yeah,
No,
Peggy.
OPSU has the Ontario Provincial Pension Plan. What are you doing?
I have to get some more water. I'm hot.
OPSU staff might have their own pension plan. That's very possible. He's apparently very thirsty tonight.
Well, it's hot. It's not heat wave anymore, thankfully, but it's hot. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, John Barlich with another super chat says, do you think Hillary's endorsement of Engel hurt him, or was it other things?
I think it was other things. I certainly think that Hillary's endorsement among certain people is a negative. But I wonder if those people that care enough to hate a Hillary endorsement were even considering voting for Engel. So a lot of us on social media were like, and we noted last night, I asked people, would you take an endorsement from Hillary Clinton? Mm-hmm. Yes or no? Would you want that? And pretty much everyone said no, except for people saying yes, so I could say that I reject your endorsement. Actually, again, tonight, would people take an endorsement from Hillary Clinton for the office they were running for? My answer would be no. But in any case, his endorsements were all very much corporate elite Democrats, very out of touch. I don't know if that mattered all that much. I think by that point, what mattered was the conversation because of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and others had changed. And Elliot Engel with the hot mic saying, I wouldn't be here if I didn't, I wouldn't care, I wouldn't be here if I didn't have a primary. All of these things played a much bigger role than endorsements, I think.
Okay, we have another super chat that says, John Parlich says, Christo is a thirsty boy. Is this thirsty in terms of like actually thirsty, or thirsty in terms of how we discussed thirsty last time?
I think this is the literal thirsty.
The literal thirsty.
And Dafrax is saying, get Christo some water, please. Raw Material says, ENT says, never she pulls so low. You know what's really interesting? I've looked at the historical numbers. Hillary was very popular in like the late 90s, early 2000s. Bree and I were like, we were alive, but like we were, why, for people who were around back then and like more following politics, why was Hillary so popular then? She was very popular, not just sort of popular, like Bernie popular in some of the polls. Mm-hmm. And then she became super unpopular, and now she's hated, right? And I don't think without merit, but I find it interesting.
I'm trying to find Lisa Hildebrandt had a really good comment.
Okay, well,
talk about something else.
Dafrax says, Brianna, give your man some water. He dying.
He'll live. He'll live.
Jamal Harris, I would rather take a George W. Bush endorsement. Skull face. Yeah, I don't know if you guys saw, but Barack Obama was lying about George W. Bush today. Obama and Joe Biden, it was either today or yesterday, but I saw the news today, did a joint live stream town hall thing. And basically, Barack Obama said, you know, I disagreed with George W. Bush on a lot of things, but that man had a fundamental respect for law and order. Really?
Is that why
George
he
W.
started
Bush.
an illegal war?
George W. Bush has respect for law and order. Really? Like, I get it. I get the point is, like, you're running against Trump, and so the point is to say, like, we want you reasonable Republicans, come to our team. We respect Bush and Reagan, and we respect all the great Republicans. We love John McCain and all these people. But, like, yeah, that's the argument we've been hearing.
That's funny.
Yeah, that was Obama today. Absolutely horrific to just whitewash the history. I get it. I get that, like, the Obamas and the Bushes are friends now. Like, I get that. I get that George W. Bush has basically been welcomed into, like, the friend group of Hollywood progressives, like Ellen DeGeneres, union-busting Ellen. You know, like, the reality is that, like, I get that, but the man was not a believer in law and order. I know Obama wasn't either, but Bush did nationally and internationally truly awful things.
Okay, Lisa Hildebrand says, kudos to the K-pop stans and TikTok kids first ruining Trump's rally in Tulsa.
Yeah, I love that. That was a fantastic story. Basically, and we covered it on the channel, Trump's rally, he was expecting 1 million people, between online people who registered to come, and then also 40,000 people for an overflow and 20,000 for the actual arena. And basically 6,000 people showed up. Mm-hmm. Like, those are numbers, 6,200. Those are numbers from the Tulsa Fire Department.
Is that it?
Yeah. So
I
the
thought
Tulsa
it was 19,000.
Yeah, that's what the capacity was for the main arena.
Oh.
But only 6,200 people showed up, according to the Tulsa Fire Department, which is, a pretty accurate measure, right? Because they do safety. They got to keep capacity. And so basically, people didn't show up. So basically, what we saw was this like freak out by Trump. And it turns out that young people on Twitter and on TikTok, K-pop fans, kids on TikTok, were basically, registering by the dozens, if not more, to make it look like this event was going to be really popular. And not only did this inflate the expected turnout, which made Trump embarrassed, so because he couldn't downplay expectations, he had to go on about this being 1 million people wanting to come. It also messed with Republican data tracking, because the point of the 1 million people is even Trump realized 1 million people literally wouldn't show up. Mm-hmm. It's Tulsa. It's a fairly large city, but in a state, in a part of the country with not a whole lot of people, right? There's not a whole lot of big cities around Tulsa. And so getting 1 million people to go to Tulsa for an event is likely impossible. And so, the point was, we're getting data. Those people we can now send them emails. They'll now be on our fundraising lists. We'll know their age, their demographic, their location. And we can use all of that to
if it wasn't all lies.
Yeah, if it wasn't all lies. Exactly. Brandon nails it. If this data is some kid from like South, Korea, even, because this is probably international, signing up and saying they live in, St. Louis, Missouri, and they have 3 kids or whatever, they were all going to the event, that screws the data. There were kids from London, England. There were kids from BC. All these people on Twitter are like, yeah, my daughter signed up for 4 tickets. We live in Saskatchewan. Like, that data's useless now. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it was great to see.
Okay, how does someone make a one-time donation to you?
There's a couple ways. If you want, there should be a link. Let me just double check here. There should be a link here. I'll just grab it here. This is PayPal. And so you can give me a donation here via PayPal. I'll drop the link in the description. That's one thing you can do. Let me just see make sure the link works here. It should work. Yeah. Okay. So that you can make a one-time donation via PayPal. For Canadians, you can also send an Interact e-transfer. You could just do that. I think it's just my email. It's just Christo Aivalis, my name, just one word, no underscores, dashes, whatever, at gmail.com. And you could do it that way as well. But either one of those are fine. And so you can make one-time donations that way. Because I know a lot of people, they don't want to necessarily do like a monthly Patreon or a monthly YouTube thing. And so those are great ways to support the channel as well. And some people do that. Every once in a while, some of the supporters of the channel will send me a few bucks here and there just on like PayPal or something.
Yeah, and we appreciate everything.
Yeah.
So thank you guys so much.
I mean, it really helps, right? Because, you know, with YouTube, it's like, I'll put like some days, you know, the ad revenue can be good, right? Like you can make a decent little bit of money, but then there are other days where if you want to make a video that covers controversial topics, that video might not generate any revenue at all. And so if you want to cover the actual news that matters, you have to, having people support the channel via Patreon and things like that is very helpful. And with one-time support.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have another super chat. Zach Boyle says, the retired cop Dr. Michael Wood is back on YouTube looking to do interviews. He has some good ideas focused primarily on community solutions. He was going around Dora, Rogan, and is that the Young Turks?
Yeah, the Young Turks. Yeah,
4 years ago.
Yeah, you're getting the lingo.
Right?
Oh, that's interesting. I'll check some of those out, Zach. Because I'm interested to maybe watch some of those old interviews and some of his new stuff, because I think it's good, and I think it's interesting that we get this good perspective from former police. There was this really good Twitter thread. If somebody can remember what the name of the person was, let me know, or let us know. And it was a former Ontario provincial police officer, actually. But the story could apply everywhere, about how that, you know, why it's wrong to just say there's only a few bad apples in policing. Because his argument was, when he witnessed a fellow police officer do something inappropriate to a citizen, and he basically was forced out of his job when he wouldn't lie on his police report. Basically, the person was maybe being what you might call disrespectful, but the police officer, the other arresting officer, you know, punched them or something, right? And you know, in the nose, and it caused severe injury. And so they were all gathering together, and the whole point was, we're all going to write in our reports that they were the aggressor. Mm-hmm. When, of course, that was not true. Yeah. And so this officer refused to lie in his report, and then was eventually found to have acted in misconduct because he lied on his report. And so there's a good need to talk about how from the police's perspective, the bad apples are the ones that stand up for citizens.
Yeah. Okay. There was another question here.
Yeah, that's a good point. Raw material. David Dole on the Rational National, he sort of did a breakdown of that Twitter chain, like a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. But you could probably go on Twitter and like also read it for yourself too. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a police officer from Ontario. I know that because they were in the Ontario Provincial Police. It's basically like the state, our equivalent of the state troopers, if you will.
Okay, last question here, and then I'm gonna go to bed.
Okay.
Does that say Zeno?
Yeah.
Zeno Fanes says, "Are you familiar with Adam Curtis? Thoughts on his work?" Who is Adam Curtis?
I'm not familiar with Adam Curtis, at least not from the name. You know.
Okay, Zeno, let us know who that is in the comments, and then Christo might be able to Google it really quick.
Yeah, I'm not 100% on who Adam Curtis is, but let me know. Maybe I am if you let me know a little bit more about them.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay. Do you want more water?
Yes, please.
Jesus. Okay. Good night, everybody.
Good night. So, guys, everyone say bye to Brianna. It's always great to have her join us. She'd love to stay longer. It's just, you know, everything is so hectic now. Oh, the monitor's right here too. Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. It's the system, Christopher, 100%. Right? Like, the systems of accountability aren't actually there to prevent the police from doing bad things. They're to prevent people from talking about the bad things that are being done. At least that's my perspective, and I don't know if, you know, that's 100% correct, but that's how I see it, like, personally. Everyone's saying goodnight to Bree. That's great to hear. Okay, Samantha Sider says Adam Curtis is a great movie maker. He made a good documentary, hyper normalization about what led to Trump. Okay, certainly. I don't think I've seen that movie, but that's something I certainly have to look into. Usman says, what are your thoughts about rent control? I mean, I think rent control is something we need. It's not a panacea. It's not necessarily a silver bullet. But it's something that you need to see. I've heard arguments against it saying, oh, it slows down development. But the reality is that we see tons of development in places like Vancouver, but that development doesn't lead to lower rental prices. And the development isn't often matched to the needs of regular working class people and poor people and middle class people. So it's not like you can just say rent control, slap on rent control, and everything will be fine. Because I do think density can be an issue. I do think that in certain parts of Toronto, maybe they do need to build up more. But I don't necessarily think that, there's any one-size-fits-all solution. And I also think, like, for instance, we need to build more public housing. We need to actually build housing that's built by the government, but whether it's federal, municipal, provincial government, statewide governments, cities, maybe they can partner with cooperative groups and things like that and charities to do it. But non-profit, publicly owned housing that is not rented out on a profit basis and that's actually accessible for low-income people. Affordable housing that's actually affordable. And that can serve multiple purposes. It can ensure that you have mixed income neighborhoods, right? That you create neighborhoods where people from various walks of life live. In areas where, like the United States, frankly, where areas like New York City is one of the most segregated cities in the United States because of costs. There's no formal law, of course, saying that this neighborhood is for only people of this background. No law saying that anymore. But if neighborhoods overwhelmingly cater to the top 1 to 5% of incomes, and those people are disproportionately non-black, non-native, non-Hispanic, effectively you've created a neighborhood which segregates out low-income people of all backgrounds, but disproportionately racialized people. So public housing can diversify in both social and racial terms your neighborhood. It can also have downward pressures on prices because you're raising the housing stock and you're creating lower price housing stock, which could create down market pressures. You can also challenge the profit motives, which, help to, price people out because we treat housing as an investment and not as a necessity. But I mean, there's other things too. One thing that we all knew, and Bria and I, we've been talking about this, but we all know is that Airbnb is a scourge on rental markets, an absolute scourge in big cities, especially that are very that get a lot of tourism. Airbnb is a scourge.
Raw Material wants to know if I'm a doctor too.
Brianna doesn't have a doctorate, although Brianna does have a master's degree. She has a master's degree in history. But basically, Airbnb is a scourge, right? So how Airbnb works is that a lot of people started realizing, either property owners or just frankly, the individual people were like, I can rent out an apartment for $1,200 a month. Or I can rent it out for $100 a night. And as long as I can fill it for 13 nights a month, then I make profit relative to renting it to a renter. And I don't have to worry about price controls. And I don't have to worry about tenancy rights. And I don't have to worry about all these sorts of things. And so what was happening in Toronto, especially in parts of the city that tourists wanted to be, was rental stock was disappearing and becoming Airbnb stock. And there was no replacement. And so all the hand-wringing from the neoliberals, it's like, oh, it's the price control. Oh, it's the labor regulations. The unionized construction workers make too much money. Or social housing is bad or whatever. We need to just allow people to build 100-story buildings made out of napkins, and then we'll have all the housing we need. The biggest thing was Airbnb. And actually what happened was when the crisis hit, a lot of these people that took out like 12 rental contracts and subletted them to Airbnb tenants, guests, they're starting to go bankrupt, which frankly they deserve it. But also you're seeing a lot more landlords put up former Airbnb properties for 12-month rentals for the standard, rental relationship. So we're getting proof that Airbnb was totally putting upward price pressure on the rental stock in big cities. See, this is interesting because, I'm a doll here. I've seen them make some comments tonight. One, just on their most recent one, they're saying, nothing is for free, nothing but hard work. You should go work on a farm. There is no one in the United States that gets more government subsidies than farmers. I'm not saying that farmers, especially like people who actually farm, not just agribusiness, that they don't physically work hard, but they fundamentally get so many subsidies, way more than a poor person, right? We're seeing it. We're seeing it during this crisis. We've seen it before. Farming is not a good example to give when it's like hard work. You get rewarded for your hard work and nothing else. Farmers get rewarded simply for being farmers. Further to that, everywhere, including in Canada, labor laws are systematically designed to make farm labor pay less, have less rights, have less freedoms, less job security for the workers. Right? So farmers are subsidized not only by government subsidies and by price controls and things like that to help them, but they get subsidized by allowing their workers to be more exploited. Right? Also, this goes back to what we heard last night, guys. People want it both ways. People will say that people like Bernie, AOC, the squad, progressive Democrats are all intellectual elitists that don't understand the working class Joe and Jane. That's what they'll say. And then you have people like I'm a doll here say that AOC is nothing but and he used this term, or she used this term, barmaid. I was reading the comments here, I don't forget, who knows how to work social media. So what is it? What is it? Is it the Democrats, the progressives that don't understand the working class Joe and Jane? Or is it people that mock AOC for being somebody who, before she went to Congress, had a very working class job? When we talk about representative democracy, the democracy needs to be representative. And it isn't. And it's not just in terms of gender and race. It's also in terms of occupation. Why are so many goddamn lawyers holding high office? What are the percentage of people that are lawyers? Should they really be 20%, 30% of all the parliamentarians? 20% of people aren't lawyers, right? 30% of people aren't lawyers. I get it. I get that there's certain things that training for a law school or training to be a historian or having a PhD give you certain skill sets to be a politician. I get that. But shouldn't there be more bartenders than lawyers in the Congress? Shouldn't, in a representative democracy, there have been at least a few more presidents that worked with their hands? Shouldn't there have been a few more presidents that didn't go to university. The average American, historically especially, has no university degree. And yet every modern president does. And the older presidents, they didn't, but like university wasn't as essential. You could apprentice to be a lawyer back then. Like Sir John A. Macdonald, Canada's first prime minister, was a lawyer but didn't go to university. He didn't have to. But like, why is that? So are you really, so is it the Democrats who are all elitist because they ignore what working class people want? Or is it AOC haters that absolutely cannot ever resist saying she's nothing but a barmaid? She's a regular working class Jane. More than the ghouls that fill the Republican benches in the House and Senate anyway. Yeah, AOC, and she's extremely qualified, but the point is, they ignore all that, one, because she's a woman, because she's racialized, right? They assume that, like, she can't be educated, she's a young Hispanic woman. I know that. There's definitely discrimination happening there. She's young, she's attractive, and she's racialized, so everyone assumes that she doesn't have a whole lot going on intellectually, and they also assume that, she's just a bartender. Look, she's a millennial, man. We got plenty of people who have advanced degrees and succeeded in those degrees. They didn't just get them, they were leaders who just don't have the jobs that boomers and even these older Gen X people were able to get because the economy is rigged. It's rigged. AOC 30 years ago would not be a bartender. With her qualifications, she would have had a better job probably. But that's what being a millennial is like in 2020 or 2018 or whatever it was when she ran for Congress. Yeah, like Rachel here, just like Rachel. AOC tended bar after college because shock. Not all of us get relevant jobs that pay rent right out of college. Exactly. Look, I'm probably not going to get to be a tenure track professor. 30 years ago, I would have been. But for millennials, whether it's for any field, the game is rigged. And so you have people who work as bartenders. You have people who are overqualified, quote unquote, for the work they do. But those people actually represent the lived experience of millennials more than Chelsea goddamn Clinton, who's like, I guess, I'm just a regular teenager growing up in America and I make $9 million a year now. She does have a PhD from Oxford, and I'm not suggesting she didn't earn her PhD. I'm sure she did. But most people with PhDs don't get $9 million board jobs because mommy and daddy were president, or mommy wanted to be president but couldn't be, but daddy was president, right? AOC represents the lived experiences of Americans more than any Republican elected right now in the House or Senate. Or at least, give me an example. Is there a Republican that reflects the lived experiences of regular working class Americans of any background more than AOC? I don't know. I mean, AOC is not even perfect, to be fair, because people are noting she's very highly educated and very highly accomplished. There's way more people out there that didn't even have the opportunities AOC had. That didn't even get to go to university or college. And I think AOC would be the first person to tell you that as much as she's faced challenges, she's been lucky in a lot of ways. Yeah, well, HPMC. Well, we're talking with university educations, in academia in particular, the decoupling of the amount of jobs relative to the amount of graduates hadn't started in the 80s in Canada, at least. That's really more of a last 10, 15 years thing in Canada. In general, class mobility broke down in the mid 1980s, if not a little bit earlier. But in terms of like people with advanced degrees not getting employment with those degrees, that's even more intensified now. Rachel said, Chelsea Clinton's job is being Chelsea Clinton, for which she's very well compensated. Look, I mean, I guess you could say no one's better at being Chelsea Clinton than Chelsea Clinton. So maybe you could say she's the best in the world at what she is. But I don't know. Basically, Reagan ruined everything. I mean, yeah, you could say that. Although we have to remember, like, the roots of Reaganism come from the 1970s, right? Like, where the wage and price controls. And what I argue in my research is that, yeah, a lot of the bad things that people associate with neoliberalism in Canada start with Brian Mulroney, who was prime minister. He started later than Reagan, but he was prime minister from 84 to like 92 or something, 93. And he had a big overlap with Reagan for at least a few years. Starts under the previous regime of Pierre Trudeau, because there's like you see the start of outsourcing. You see attacks on the rights of workers to strike and bargain collectively, all those sorts of things. People are saying Nancy Pelosi understands the struggle. She almost ran out of ice cream during the crisis. Yeah, I still think about that from time to time, guys. Nancy Pelosi basically coming out and saying, like, look, man, we have a real struggle here. People are losing their jobs. People don't know where their rent check is going to come from. People don't know if they're going to be able to get health care if they get sick, both during this crisis and after it. But my goodness, I almost ran out of my very fancy ice cream. But we also have to remember that Reagan again. It's here in Canada. Another example is like, yeah, Brian Mulroney did a lot of damage, but it would have been impossible without the intellectual roots from Pierre Trudeau, which caused a lot of problems. And also, we have to remember that in Canada, at least, the harshest cuts, they started with Mulroney, but they became even harsher when the Liberals came back to power in the 1990s. So, like, Trudeau set the intellectual framework, then Mulroney started enacting, like, Canadian Reaganism, and then Chrétien and Martin, again, supposedly progressives because they were liberals, like Bill Clinton was supposedly going to be a progressive because he was a Democrat, they enacted even more austerity, harsher austerity that hurt a lot of Canadians. KCH Müller says, with the super chat and support, I'm guessing from Germany, because I see with the euro and the last name. So thank you for the support from across the pond. Hello, Christo. I agree that AOC is a very smart person. Why on earth are people like Nico House and in part Jimmy Dore so hostile towards AOC? Well, like, I don't dedicatedly follow Nico and Jimmy that much. So, like, I don't see all of their takes. But in general, I think they're critical of her, and not without some reason, that she is not hostile enough to Nancy Pelosi and the party insiders. That she hasn't been as willing to take certain stands. And I think, to some degree you can make that argument, but I think you have to look at it at the context that she's literally one of 435 members of the House, and then you add in 100 senators. So there's more than 500 legislators in Washington, and she's only one of them. And she has often taken stands, and I agree that maybe she should be more critical of Nancy Pelosi, but she's been among the more critical people of Pelosi. She did vote against the second round of stimulus. She was part of the fight along with Bernie to improve the first round, however broken it was. And I feel like I don't know. I feel like they're a little unfair to her. Even though they're not 100% wrong, I sometimes feel Jimmy and Nico are a bit too polemical when it comes to criticizing people like AOC. And I don't know if it serves anyone's interest. But that's just my perspective. Right? Like, I think just to a certain degree, and maybe you need some of this. You need some of this sometimes, but they play a contrarian role, right? Like some people might call it trolling, but you might also call it contrarianism, that they just go against the established flow, right? That AOC, a lot of us support AOC. Well, they'll say, well, slow your roll. Then again, sometimes I disagree, because sometimes Jimmy will almost move to, I don't know, like there'll be real bad things happening and from like the Trump regime, and maybe he'll suggest it's not as bad as we think. And sometimes that's the case, but I don't know. My perspective is AOC has done a good job, and she's not perfect. And I think it's important we realize she's not perfect. And so insofar as they've done that, I support, people like Jimmy sort of being a bit more cynical. But I think sometimes they cross that line into being unfair. I think they've been unfair. Yeah, and that's another point. They supported Tulsi even though she didn't support Medicare for all. Like, at all. Her position was basically Buttigieg's position. I get that on certain issues, Tulsi had some great positions. But on economics, at least, she's a neoliberal. Tulsi's a neoliberal, every bit as much as Pete Buttigieg or Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or Amy Klobuchar. She's a neoliberal. Like, who has a certain anti-interventionism. Right? And so, you can't on the one hand say AOC, because she slips up on a couple cases here and there, she's canceled, but we can allow Tulsi to still be one of the good ones, even though she opposes, literally, I think, along with a Green New Deal, which I also don't think Tulsi ever committed to, the Medicare for All and the Green New Deal are the two most important policies the United States needs. Raw material ENT is fired up right now. Look, again, like I don't seek to cause drama with other creators. I mean, like, look, being a little cynical now and then is good. Sometimes, all of us have the tendency to stand so hard that we lose a little bit of that criticism. But you can't let that go so far that you start being unfair to people. Leslie says, again, thank you for the support, Leslie. During an interview with Howie Hawkins, Chris Hedges completely destroyed the lesser of two evils argument, and it was awesome. I think more people need to hear it. I'm going to go check that out, Leslie. That's certainly good. Howie Hawkins, for those who don't know, he's likely going to be the Green candidate. I haven't been following the Green race all that closely, but my understanding is that he has a huge delegate lead in their nominating process, so I assume he's going to be the nominee. I don't know. He's not officially the nominee, right? But yeah, I like to check that out. Again, it's an interesting perspective because some people will say lesser of two evils, and some people will say that argument prevents real change. And honestly, those perspectives are both more than valid. KCH Muller says, Tulsi is a right-winger in disguise. I mean, look, is she a right-winger? I don't know. I think Tulsi is very much, in broad terms, you might call her something of a centrist. And maybe people would get mad about that. But she's, on some issues, she's progressive. And on other issues, she's conservative. And, some of her anti-interventionism has been progressively minded. Some of it isn't. I have very big concerns with her relationship to Modi and his movement in India, which I do see as very dangerous in a global sense. I'm not sure if I would say she's a right-winger, but I certainly don't understand why she got so much support from progressives. Especially this time around. Back in 2016, I get it. She was new. We didn't know a whole lot about her. She did, to her credit, take a big stand backing Bernie. Because don't forget, this time around, most of the Democratic Party was still against Bernie. But Bernie had way more people. He had AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Mark Pokin, Ro Khanna, Pramila Jayapal. There's so much more people, so many more people backing Bernie for president, right? And so from my perspective, she's far too right-wing for me. So when I was saying, who are the decent candidates, until, say, January when she started to just start lying, I said the Elizabeth Warren was better than Tulsi. And a lot of people didn't like that, but I think I was right. As bad as Warren was, she's probably better than Tulsi because Tulsi's position on Medicare for All is even worse than Warren's. Sean asks with the super chat, what are the two most important policies for Canada? I mean, that's a great question. And I actually think in some ways they're similar. I think we need Medicare for all and a Green New Deal. A lot of Americans don't know this, but we don't actually have Medicare for all in Canada. We have a system of Medicare that you might call universal single payer, but it leaves out a lot of things. So, for example, if you go to the doctor in Canada, you go see your GP for a regular checkup, that's covered. You take your health card, you go to your doctor, you never pay. Not even you have to pay a copay or anything. Nothing. Covered. You need a surgery at the hospital, or you end up having to go to the outpatients because you're not feeling well, and you need emergency care. Covered. Great. 100%. But if you need to fill a prescription based on what the doctor diagnosed you with, that's not covered. And so you need workplace insurance, or you might not be able to afford your medicine. Or you can go to the doctor and they can say, look, the reason you're sick, the reason you have a fever is because you actually have a cavity and you need to get a root canal. That diagnosis is free. But the antibiotics you'll need to get better and the dental work you'll need to prevent further infection will not be covered because dentistry is not covered in Canada. Right? So, in essence, you don't eye care, same thing. If you need certain if you need glasses, they're not covered. Most mental health type work isn't covered. Physiotherapy isn't covered. These things are not covered in Canada. And so like with the United States, you have to rely on workplace health insurance. You have to hope that you or your parents or your spouse has a job that provides benefits, right? You'll never lose your basic healthcare coverage. You'll never lose your ability to go see a doctor. You'll never lose your ability to, if you need a heart surgery, you won't pay for it. You won't. But whenever medicine or eye care or teeth come in, you're SOL if you don't have insurance or the cash to pay for it. And so what the NDP has been running on has been to greatly expand our healthcare. The biggest thing that focus now is pharmacare, but we've also started to talk about dental care. So I think Medicare for all, real deal Medicare for all. No exceptions. Everything is covered, including, as we've been seeing now, guys, long-term care. Senior, people who have to live in long-term care facilities, like seniors and people with disabilities. Fully covered. No more private health care. And we need a Green New Deal in Canada. Same thing. We need a Green New Deal in Canada. The NDP offered one last election, but probably it wasn't ambitious enough, if I'm being honest. But we need a Green New Deal. We need a radical plan to decarbonize, and we need a radical plan to guarantee basic health care to everyone. Now, there are other things that are very important. We need a wealth tax and other tax increases to bring more equality to the country. We need free post-secondary education. But I think a bigger priority is healthcare and a Green New Deal. You might also argue that reconciliation with Indigenous peoples is extremely important. I don't know. Maybe that should be in the top two. I'm not sure. But justice for Indigenous peoples, if I had to pick three, would certainly be one of the top three. Yeah, community-based care as well, Peggy. Yeah, you're right. There's so much that isn't covered. There's so much that isn't covered. Yep, we want. Yeah, a lot of these things were in the LEAP manifesto, Bobby Hill. A lot of these things were in there. I mean, when the LEAP manifesto came out, if you Google it, back when it came out, I was writing articles on the LEAP manifesto, at least a little bit. I supported it. The framing and how it was rolled out was not as successful as the Green New Deal. And I don't know fully why that is, if it was the language, if it was the who they got on board, if it was how they sold it. But the LEAP manifesto did not catch on in the way the Green New Deal did. But if we're being honest, and it was awful, because I wrote an article on the Green New Deal in the Washington Post last year. But one line I had in there, but it got cut out because the article was already too long. It was edited out, was that the LEAP manifesto was very inspirational to the Green New Deal drafters. So the LEAP manifesto never caught on in the way the Green New Deal did. But the LEAP manifesto was used in part as a drafting document for the Green New Deal proposals in the U.S. So the LEAP manifesto, at least indirectly, did succeed. It came out years before the Green New Deal, and the Green New Deal basically asks for much the same thing. Usman, were Bob Rae and Dalton McGuinty good premiers? No, not really. Dalton McGuinty worse than Bob Rae, because unlike McGuinty did not have to deal with the sheer devastation of the Chrétien era cuts. Basically, the federal government in the early mid-1990s made huge cuts in terms of the money they sent to the provinces, which in turn forced the provinces to make huge cuts, not just in Ontario, but all over the country. And so anybody who was premier at the time had real difficulties dealing with that. But I would say neither were particularly good premiers, although Bob Rae did some really good things. I think Bob Rae achieved some pioneering things that got undone, but that were really good. He, for instance, created pay equity. They also, improved access to certain social services. One thing that Bob Rae should have done, and he didn't, was the Ontario NDP had a vote to legalize gay marriage in Ontario in the mid-1990s, early 1990s. We would have been one of the first places in the world to do it, more than 10 years before Canada actually did it for real. But Bob Rae chickened out and let the caucus vote their conscience. And enough NDP MPs at the time, MPPs at the time, again, not to excuse them, because NDPers should have always should support gay marriage. But it was the early 1990s still, and enough of them joined with liberals and conservatives to block the proposal. So if Bob Rae had a bit more guts, he could have gone down as the first premier to legalize gay marriage in Canada, and I think besides Denmark, be the first place in the world to do it. Dragon Progressive reminding folks to click the like button. If you're just here, click that like button. If you think anybody that you like on social media would want to follow the stream, let us know. Maybe people would find this interesting. Let them know. It's always great to click that link. Actually, before I forget, I'm going to share a link to the Discord. The Discord is, it's like a chat room thing specifically for the stream. Let me pull that, or for this channel. And it's growing more and more and more. It's still a pretty small one, but the conversation's really good. Weirdbeard, just to be clear, Weirdbeard, you are exactly wrong. You are exactly wrong, Weirdbeard. And I don't like to say that, but you're 100% wrong. Weirdbeard says the problem with Medicare for All is there's no choice of general practitioner, and government will want cheaper options, so when the doc walks in wearing military fatigue carrying a power drill, don't be surprised. Here's the thing. Your system offers less choice. First of all, the biggest problem with the United States in choice is if you have no money, you have no choice. So right off the bat, there are tens of millions of people who have no choice. In addition to that, if you lose your job and you lose your health care, you've lost any choice you could possibly have. In addition, many of the healthcare models require your doctor or the procedure you get be covered by your insurance. So your insurance company, not the government, your insurance company might dictate to you which doctors, which HMOs you can and cannot go to. And more than your doctor deciding what you need for your care, the insurance company will effectively decide based on the fact that they may or may not cover a procedure. So again, your doctor, you might not get to choose them, and your doctor in conversation with you, the only two people that should be making healthcare decisions about you, cannot decide those things, right? In Canada, again, I'm not going to defend our system as perfect. It isn't. For instance, we need more general practitioners. So there are sometimes you could be on a wait list to get one. But there is no restriction on me getting any general practitioner anywhere. I can pick my GP. Now, it might be the case that GP has a full caseload of clients and they might not be available. But there's nothing stopping me from switching GPs. The government will not assign one to me. That does not work. It's not how that works. In Canada, you have fundamentally more choice about your care on a regular person basis than you do in the United States. 100%. 100%. There's far more choice under Medicare for All than there is under the private model. Maybe not for billionaires. I don't know. Maybe not for billionaires, but like for regular people. Yeah, again, like, look, again, it's private models, because the private model might say, look, yeah, you might say, you get a new job. So you get a new job. Like, you've been working at a company for 10 years. You get a new job. You switch over. You have to switch over to their healthcare plan now because you have a new job. And then all of a sudden, they could say to you, your current GP is out of network. and so you can't go see them anymore? Is it Medicare for all that took your goddamn choice? Or is it a private insurance model? Is it the big bad government that denied you your care? Or is it a capitalist bureaucrat? So who stole from you? Who took your freedom? Right? Like that, right? And again, I'm not saying our system's perfect. We don't cover a lot of things. A lot of things aren't covered. There are issues with wait times in parts of Canada. There are. It took me a long time to get a GP in Kingston. It did. It took me a long time. But look, the reality is I would not have the American model. Yeah, Mushroom Steve, you're right. Especially in a non-unionized environment, your employer can just do that. They could just cut your health care. Right? Like if you don't have a unionized environment where the terms of your health care are protected in a union contract, like the terms of your health care are part of the collective deal, then your employer could just say on a whim, well, we've just decided to get rid of your health care. Oh, you thought that your ability to pay for your upcoming childbirth was covered? Actually, it's not covered anymore. Sorry. What choice did you get to make there? What choice? You're 2 weeks away from having a baby and your boss is like, we're not going to cover it anymore. Suck a lemon. Oh, I love that choice, guys. Joe Biden's like, oh man, look at the choice. Right? I don't know. Look, I don't want to, I don't want to be mean, but it's when people are saying things that are the exact opposite of true, I have to go in on it. Right? There is no choice, or I would say there is less choice under the American model than there is under the Canadian model. That's my view. Leslie Brown says, you should interview Wendell Potter and shut the M4A tools up. Wendell Potter. Yeah, I mean, look, that would be super interesting to interview him. That would be great. I don't know if he would want to come on my channel. Just to be clear with Leslie, it's not the anti-M4A tools. Wendell Potter, for those who don't know, I'll post a link to his Wikipedia here. He basically says he sort of got famous last year. He's been doing it for a while, I think, but he got famous last year or so, I would say, where he basically said, I was an insurance executive. I know the industry more than almost anyone, and I know that it fails in every measurable way to actually provide health care to regular Americans. You know? And that's another thing. Medicare for all is not just good for workers, it can be good for small businesses. I mean, this is an issue in Canada. In Canada, if small businesses don't have to worry about providing basic health care to their workers. So if you run a small business, in a sense, you don't need to worry about the fact that your business of 4 employees, including yourself, you don't have the economies of scale to provide insurance. And what we've actually heard from some small businesses is that they wish that Medicare would cover dental care and medicine, which it doesn't in Canada, because they would like their workers to have those things, but being a company of 4 people, they can't really set up insurance to make it happen. It's not like you need a bigger pool of people to set up insurance programs. And selfishly, not to call them selfish, but a lot of small business owners, whether you're an independent contractor or you own a company where you only have 1 or 2 or 3 employees, you often don't have medical and dental benefits in Canada. So if you're a small business owner, the best way to ensure that you can have a workforce that's protected, even though you individually don't have the economies of scale, and to ensure that you can have healthcare, even though you're not part of a big company with a big drug plan or a big, dental care plan, is to form universal models that don't depend on employment. Yeah, so he notes, and look, this is the thing here. There are business groups out there in the States that support, at the very least, a public option. They support it, again, even if you want to be cynical about it, they support it because it's look, if the government provides healthcare, I don't necessarily have to provide healthcare in the same degree. Right? Joseph Mangano says, sometimes you got to be cruel to be kind. Hashtag Christo Dunks. I don't know if that's going to become a Twitter thing. If you guys ever want a clip from these, because if you think there's a dunk-worthy moment, you want to make that a hashtag, we can do that. I know Twitch has a clip feature that people can use. And I do want to look at maybe more frequent streaming when this shutdown is over and I have more time. I do like that feature on Twitch that you can clip out things, which is good, because YouTube makes it a little bit harder for fans to take little tidbits of a stream and then share it, which I wouldn't mind, of course. One, because I think that's fun that people get engaged, but also, it's promotion. But specifically, I wish YouTube had that feature. But no, I mean, look, I don't come onto these streams looking for people to dunk on. But when people are being disingenuous, then I can't not say anything. Samantha says, we need to get a meme of Christo dancing from earlier, photoshopped in the political grave of Elliot Engel. I mean, look, you might, I mean, that would be pretty funny. That would be pretty funny. That's interesting. My name is Hello Hello. It says the U.S. media tends to write that Germany has free/universal healthcare. This is fake news. You guys have a hybrid model, I believe, right? People will say that about Canada. One, when we say free, what we mean is free at the point of use. Of course, revenue is required to pay for the systems, right? Doctors and nurses and need to be paid, and other workers need to be paid, and medical equipment is not free. It's certainly not even cheap. It all needs to be paid for. All of these things certainly matter. But, the fundamental debate is, around whether or not, it offers a universal coverage. And in Canada, I would say it doesn't. Yeah, so some countries in Europe do have a hybrid model, which is like everyone is covered through a mix and match of public and private insurance. Canada's model is, in effect, everyone has basic coverage for free, but when it comes to dental care and pharmacare, you're generally on your own. Quebec has some kind of pharmacare plan. It's not universal. Ontario has a limited plan for seniors and for like children, but these are limited. But in general, like we have these hodgepodge things. For the most part, like average person, unless they get it through work, doesn't have teeth or medicine covered. Usman Abdullah says, Christo, do people of faith in Canada support the NDP? I mean, that's an interesting question, right? Historically, the CCF NDP, because before it was the NDP, it was called the CCF, the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation. The party was, if anything, a very religious party in some ways. It didn't have a lot of support from Catholics, but it was a party rooted in the social gospel. So the first leader was a Methodist minister. Tommy Douglas was one of the leaders of the NDP, was a Baptist minister. Another leader, a famous person in the party, was also a minister. Like there's Andrew Bruin, Bill Blakey, who ran for the party leader in the early 2000s. He was a United Church minister. Sherry DeNovo, the first person to officiate a gay marriage in Canada, former NDP MPP, is a United Church minister. So there's a long tradition in Canada. Now today it's a bit more complicated. Like if very religious Christians are probably more likely, and I say this as somebody who's, a member of the Greek Orthodox Church, are more likely to be conservative. Like if you're like an evangelical. But that's not necessarily representative of all Christians. And if you're Catholic, I mean, it sort of depends. French Catholics are more likely to support liberals or the Bloc Québécois, but whereas English Catholics, I'm not necessarily sure. They're historically Catholics of all background were more likely to vote liberal than vote conservative or NDP. And yes, to be clear, the leader of the NDP is the first non-white person to lead a major federal party. And they're only, I believe, the second non-Christian to lead a major federal party. The other person was David Lewis, also NDP in the early 1970s, who was Jewish, but was a secular Jew. He wasn't a practicing Jew in the religious sense. He's actually the grandfather of Avi Lewis, Naomi Klein's husband, and the father of Stephen Lewis, the famous, Canadian humanitarian. So yeah, I would say in Canada, in general, religion is not as big a driver of partisanship as it is in the U.S. Maybe my Canadians will agree or disagree with me. Right? Like yeah, but in Canada, I mean, like there's a strong left tradition of like Christianity, and again, like we're talking about a time in Canada where almost all the immigrants to Canada were Christian, pre-World War II, like 1960, right? Like there weren't a lot of immigrants from from India yet. There weren't a lot of immigrants from the Middle East yet. Most immigrants coming to Canada were Christian. There was some Jewish people, but most people were Christian. And the argument from a lot of the left was that Christianity should inform our social justice. That if you believe the teachings of Jesus, the only solution is to ensure that everyone has food, everyone has healthcare, everyone has education, everyone has basic dignity, everyone has equality. We should, when for instance, the liberal and conservative parties in Canada didn't want to let Jewish refugees in just before the Second World War. The CCF and many Christian groups, not all, but many churches, the Mennonites and the Quakers and the Amish, for instance, said the Christian thing to do is to welcome in people in their hour of need. And so the religious arguments often came from the left. Zeno, you're right. Tommy Douglas was he wasn't necessarily the start of Medicare. People had been talking about it before him, but he was the one that really kicked it into gear as Premier of Saskatchewan. So he's the pioneer of enacting it as an actual policy. He wasn't the first person to have the idea, right? Because they were talking about it before Tommy Douglas. Like, unions had been talking about universal health care since the 1800s in Canada in some cases, going back to the Labour Party in Britain. So it wasn't a new idea, to be fair. And I mean, Dan, you could say, all religion is nonsense, and a lot of people believe that. The point with the CCF-NDP, though, was that they represented a multi-faith perspective on building a better Canada. Because, again, David Lewis, this is in the 1930s and 40s, guys. This was a time where it was openly acceptable and often expected to not like Jewish people, right? This was that, that's what it was, even in Canada and the United States. And David Lewis was very clearly a Jewish Canadian who was an immigrant directly from what is now, Poland, what was then kind of Poland, but now is Belarus, but that region of Eastern Europe. Svizhloch, I think, is the name of the village. And he was welcomed in. And he was a secular Jew. He did not practice in any meaningful way. And they gave him the most senior non-elected position in the party as a very young man, basically the executive secretary of the party, which was basically the person that ran the show. Right? And so the party was never one that excluded people based on religion, but a lot of people came to their politics via religion. And I think that's why it was a good unifier. So people have different perspectives, of course, on religion, and this is not going to be a religion good or bad stream. But the point is to say that, in Canada, a lot of people are still motivated by their faith. Maybe not as many in the United States. More Canadians per capita identify, I believe, as agnostic or as without a faith than in the United States. We're a less religious society. But I think also religion is less partisan. Although we do have, like in the U.S., an organized, right-wing fundamentalist Christian movement that organizes largely on social issues. They're bringing back pro-life policies is often a big one, even though that's not probably happening in Canada. But yeah, see, Cornel West is an example of somebody that's motivated by his faith. He reminds me in some ways of Tommy Douglas in the way he approaches things. John Barlich with the super chat says, what is your opinion on gun control? We touched a little bit on this. John, thanks again for the support. We touched a little bit on this last night. Basically, I support elements of it. I'm neither a get rid of all the guns no matter what leftist, but I'm also not every working class person needs a weapon so that we can work together to overthrow the state right now. I don't know if that's a plausible path. So, I support common sense control. No one needs an AR. No one needs that. If anything, I'm like, I think let's put it this way. I think we need more control, but the first people we need to take the guns from are the police. Right? So maybe does that make me pro-gun control? I think the police need less guns, for instance. So maybe let's start there. Guys, can we agree? The left here, that gun control, but for cops first. Can we agree on that one? I think that might unify the two lefts on gun issues. We'll start with police. You know? Agree. John says, yeah. Gene says, agree. Sylvia says, well, they have way too much power. Yes. Sure. Okay. Police need less. Yeah, I mean, Samantha, I get what you're saying. I think, look, if you would probably not give the police no tools, but in many countries, police in their day-to-day patrols don't carry like lethal weapons. Maybe they have them in their squad cars. They have them as an available tool in dire circumstances, but they don't have them as part of their regular rollout. And I think that's an important distinction. Ben Riley with the super chat and the support. Thank you, Ben, so much. Says, before we discuss political ideologies, we need to talk philosophy and psychology, like the Stanford prison experiment showed normal people can be corrupted. I mean, yeah, I think that's a fair point, and I think that it's important to look at not just ideology and theory as they exist, but how they are disseminated, how they can be understood and misunderstood, either by accident or deliberately misunderstood, and kind of misconstrued. I think that's a good point. But it's also helpful because the psychology of how people approach politics and things like that is something that, like, I'm not an expert on. But I'm guessing there are psychologists out there that study the psychology of politics, which must include discussions of ideology, but are not strictly ideological, I'm guessing, because there are a lot of people out there that don't vote based on ideology. They vote based on family traditions. They vote based on community. They vote based on internal assumptions of what that party is or isn't. So, for instance, here in Canada, if you poll conservative voters, let alone liberals, but if you poll conservative voters, they basically want the NDP platform. They want higher taxes on the rich. They want more Medicare services for everyone. They want everyone to have, more access to good housing. Like, there was these polls done after the election, and basically everything Jagmeet Singh ran on, lower cell phone prices, all of these things, everything Jagmeet Singh ran on had a support of the majority of Canadians, and most of those things support of the majority of conservative voters. And many of those people are still only going to vote conservative. And that could be based on psychology and philosophy more than anybody sitting down and thinking through what their coherent political ideology is. To be fair, Zeno, not all of our police officers ride horses. Not all of our police officers ride horses. Although some do. Some do in some cases. I know in Kingston, there's still a few police officers that are on horseback. Often when there's like a parade or something, they'll use the horses. They'll patrol on their horse. Yeah, nationalize the telecom. Yeah, 100% Waffle. You're 100% right. But what I was saying, like Jugmeat's policy was far too half-assed on telecommunications. 100%. Full nationalization of the telecoms, or at the very, very least, a federal public crown corporation to compete with the existing telecoms and to provide services based on need rather than profit, at the very least. Call it Cantel. Call it Cantel. It could guarantee high-speed internet access to people. It could service communities that the corporations have deemed unprofitable to service. All of these sorts of things. But the point is that, that conservative voters, liberal voters, green voters, they basically wanted what the NDP ran on. And why they didn't vote for it is everything from media misinformation to inertia, to political messaging, and maybe some psychological factors as well. Comrade Internet says Bo of the Fifth Column, who's a great creator, has talked about guns and the left. Yeah, do go check that out. He's a good creator. Has nuanced takes. Yeah, I think that would probably be a good place to start. Yeah, that's another option. It's been done more in the States, municipal broadband. That's not as much an issue in Canada. In Canada and some of the provinces, we do have, and have had more historically, provincially owned telecommunication companies. So there is a model in Canada for a public option. But yeah, I know in some cities in the United States have done municipal broadband, and it's been a great idea. Ben Riley says, with the super chat, says it's similar to the social psychology found in marketing or a Darren Brown mentalist trick, magic trick / psychological warfare, aka a con that can get anyone. I mean, yeah, we're all susceptible. We're all susceptible to these sorts of things. And if you think that you're particularly plugged in, if you think that you're particularly knowledgeable, maybe that gives you some resistances, but it's not total. And I, just like anybody else, am probably at risk of, facing some of these psychological issues in politics. Craig just put up a tweet. I saw that on social media that there's there's the trending French Revolution is trending today because Lindsey Graham said that it's devastating that right now the left is taking over the Democratic Party and they're bringing the French Revolution back. Well, first of all, it's like the French Revolution was directly inspired by the American Revolution, I always find it interesting. I wish the Democrats were what the Republicans say the Democrats are. I don't know, does that make sense, guys? Like, I wish that it was true what the Republicans say about the Democrats. Right? Like, I wish that, we could say, look, we actually do just want to abolish capitalism. And we actually do just want to take away all private health insurance because, that's our goal. Neocon says, I wanted to send a super chat about Trump's religious beliefs, but the censor has been giving me a hard time. See my comment right below this one. Okay, I'll take a look, Neocon, and thank you for the support. It says Trump and his right-wing sycophants are evangelical, fundamentalist, born-again Christian. Yeah, I can see that. Look, everyone's hypocritical. Everyone's hypocritical about, like, their beliefs from time to time. But Trump and a lot of his core supporters really take the cake. Like, Trump is not a Christian. He's not. Like, at least in the way he lives his life. He's not. And I get it. I get, like, that evangelicals are like, look, man, we know that in any objective measure, this guy's a monster. But, like, they're like, he got us our Supreme Court justices, and, you know, he's going to protect Israel and all of these BS excuses. But the guy in no way lives any sort of authentic Christian belief. You know, you could say that about a lot of presidents maybe, but, like, I think at least with the George Bush, even George W. Bush had, like, his born again story where, like, I think Laura Bush basically helped him get clean and sober, and religion played a role in that. And I don't know if that's true or not, but it's more believable than Donald Trump. Ben, to be clear, Ben says, IMO, the alt-right / fascism wasn't an anomaly, it was marketing. Are you suggesting that, like, the use of the term alt-right to become a substitute for, like, far-right, for fascism, things like that wasn't an accident? I would agree. I would agree that there was a couple things there. There's a couple things going on with why alt-right became a popular terminology, I would say. First, you know, a big factor is probably the a big factor would be the desire for conservatives to not look like losers. And so their goal was to say the left are the prudes now. They're the ones that are all about PC culture. They're all the ones that don't want you to have any fun anymore. They're the ones that, you know, are going to let women and minorities ruin your good times. And we're the hip, young, exciting alt-right. So alt there is like alternative music. Like, we're the new punk. That's the argument. Remember, like, conservative is the new punk. And it's not true. It's not true at all. But that's the argument. Like, the real badass rebels are conservatives now. That's the argument. And then also, I think a role in it was to don't call us Nazis. Don't call us, you know, totalitarians. Don't call us fascists. Call us the alt-right. Yeah, you're right. I think that certainly plays a role. Oh yeah, Leslie, he's like, Laura Bush killed the guy. I remember Family Guy saying something about that. That was like an old Family Guy episode where they brought that up. And I think I looked that up at the time because Peter Griffin, I forget the context, but there's a scene in Family Guy. This is years ago now, at least 10, 15 years ago, where they were like he's like, Laura Bush killed a guy. Yeah, I remember that scene. Yeah, Joseph Mangano. Nobody cooler than Checks Notes, Steve Bannon. Yeah. But, like, that's the argument they're making, right? That's the argument I've heard. It's a dual thing. It's to sort of paper over, like, conservative beliefs, but it's also an attempt to kind of portray themselves as countercultural. That, again, we're the ones that are standing up against the elite. We're the underdogs. We're the rebels. We're the we're the ones that are shaking things up. And that, you know, it actually it's the poor people and it's the marginalized people, and it's the the unions and progressives, they're the ones that actually have all the power now. And so if you want to be with a true underdog, come join Donald Trump in his 2020 campaign or 2016 campaign. And that was the effort, at least. I'm hearing all these crazy stories about Mitt Romney, and I never heard that story. Look, throwing back the apple, says Christo, you give this is it? Let me see. You give me Slavoj Žižek vibes sometimes. I have no idea why. Look, actually, a lot of people have said that I look like Žižek. I'm not saying I agree, but I've heard that. And people have said that since the early days of my channel, when I just had like a couple thousand subscribers. People would be like, this guy looks like a young Žižek. So I don't really see it, but enough people have said it that you're not crazy. I don't know what, like, I keep looking at, like, let me look, bring this up again. Young Žižek. Okay. If I find a picture of Žižek that's younger, maybe I'll take like a link and I'll send it to you guys. So this is like, let me see, can I find a picture of him when he's younger? I'm trying to find like younger pictures of him. But I mean, I don't see it. Some other people see it. But I don't necessarily see it. People are saying I'm not disheveled enough. Oh, I'm almost disheveled enough. Maybe that's part of it. When my hair is like really long, it's getting there. I can get pretty disheveled. And I get it. Žižek, like me, sort of has a very round face. So I get that too. But maybe Slavoj is my dad. I don't think so. I don't think Slavoj is my father. I don't think so. Okay, Ben Riley says, I think, with the super chat again, thank you so much, Ben, for your support. It says, I think it was reactionary contrarianism to SJWs online and led some that were perhaps unfairly socially isolated to go to the comfort of the dark side. I think that's part of it. I think that there were some people that were sort of apolitical, but just angry at the status quo. Like they knew that something was wrong with society, like the lack of opportunity, the lack of community, the lack of social engagement, that kind of plagues society. And, they were convinced that it wasn't capitalism, inequality, the breakdown of communities under neoliberal capitalism that was the issue, but rather the issue was feminism, leftism, cultural Marxism, whatever they want to call it. And yeah, I think that's part of it. And there are roots, honestly, there are roots between like Gamergate and the alt-right and, or whatever you want to call it. But I do think it is rooted in a sense in those cultures. And those cultures, for instance, would often say, we just want to have a good time. But like people like Anita Sarkeesian, like feminist commentary, is ruining our good time with their killjoy feminism. And so I think that the alt-right terminology was rooted in this reactionary contrarianism, but also this desire to be seen as the ones defending the right for you to have fun against the cancel culture leftists. Now, of course, within the game culture, many people on the left who have criticized elements of gaming, and I'm a gamer, I play video games, so I come from that community. They've never been the ones saying, oh, we should censor video games or ban video games. That was always conservatives. it's always been conservatives, like religious conservatives, saying we need to ban video games or censor video games. That's never been the left. And yet, like, in their mind, it's actually feminists that want to ruin video games. When all feminists are saying is, hey, video games as they currently are maybe don't reflect the diversity of experiences of all people, and we'd like to see more video games do that. Whereas fundamentalist Christians have often said, video games are the devil, ban the video games. Yeah, AG asked what games I play. I mean, I've been playing a lot of games fairly recently. I've played. I just finished Final Fantasy 15, which was okay. Not as good as some of the classic ones, but it was fun. Just finished. I know it's a few years old, but I just got around to playing it. I bought it years ago, but couldn't get into it. Right now, I'm playing through Divinity Original Sin 2 or Divinity 2 Original Sin right now, which was which is I'm not done it yet, but it's very fun. Every once in a while, I play Rocket League. If people play Rocket League, join the Discord, and maybe we could play Rocket League together with some folks. That might be fun. But I play Rocket League every now and then. Those are the games I'm playing right now. I don't have as much time right now, especially, again, daycare's closed. It's just there's not as much free time during the day, and so less free time at night as I catch up to do work. But that basically, just play a lot of RPGs, play sports games every now and then, like simulation games, like grand history games. I'm really looking forward to Crusader Kings 3. I play a lot of Crusader Kings 2. So Crusader Kings 3 is going to be really fun, I think. Do I play Fortnite? I've played it a little bit, but not really. Not really, Usman. It's fun. I think it's a pretty fun game, but it's just, I don't know. Something about it didn't click with me. I don't know. But it's a fun game. Yeah, throwing back the apple, a lot of people were affected by that. A lot of people were. I don't think there's any shame in admitting it. That, a lot of people were convinced, right? Because again, you think about it, a lot of these things are in the early 2010s. A lot of people are out of work, or they have university degrees. They did all the right things, and society, it didn't work out for them. They have no money. They might still be living at home, or they live in a very small apartment. They have basically, through no fault of their own in many cases, just don't have a very good life. And they're miserable, and they're angry, and they're right to be miserable and angry most of the time. But then it's like there's no coherent political vision to say, you're angry because there's no union at your job to give you a good wage that allows you to enjoy your life. You're angry because despite the fact that the internet exists, we've never been more disconnected in other ways. You're angry because no one's really taught you how to communicate with people, whether it's in social or romantic terms. You're angry because you did everything right and you're still struggling. You're angry that your wages stay the same, but all your costs are going up. But you know who will? So there's nobody telling you that capitalism is fundamentally the issue. The issue is feminists, immigrants, the social justice warriors, people wanting to take women in video games and reduce their cleavage size. These are the enemies. Yeah, some of these history games are really good, Peggy. I mean, any video game you have to be careful because a game has to work as a game, and so often it'll sacrifice certain historical things. But even passively, I feel like as somebody that's interested in history, you learn things, or at least you get the inspiration to learn more about things by playing things like Crusader Kings, I think. Genius, I was trying to make a joke, but I was look, not every joke works. I'm the first to admit it. Yeah, I identify as a gamer Canadian. The most oppressed of all people are gamers. Yeah, Civ 6 is pretty good. Civ 6 is pretty good. I like that game. It's fun. It's fun. Mario's Time Machine. Yeah, not as much, right? There was Mario is Missing. I remember that as a kid being kind of fun, as a kid that really liked maps and geography. But these games are not always historic. Yeah, I could... More games critical of capitalism would be really good. There are some games that just offer this with nuances, like even like Stardew Valley. Stardew Valley isn't strictly a criticism of capitalism per se, but it is a criticism of like the soul-crushing nature of corporate capitalist daily life. I mean, ultimately, you set yourself up as a petty bourgeois farmer, but like, so it's not necessarily a socialist vision, but the fact of the matter is, like, it's a critique of modern capitalist society. And so there are games that at least skirt around the surface. Do I play FIFA? I have played FIFA. I don't play it like as much as I used to. I haven't played this iteration, but I pick it up every couple of years and we'll play it. So guys, I think I'm going to wrap up. This was fantastic. We're at about 10:30. We did go to, we had like a 3-hour stream last night, 3.5 hours. So I'm a little beat. But I want to just underline that this was great. This was fantastic. Thank you so much for all the great questions and comments and jokes. It was really fun. It was just fantastic to see. So for those who are new to the channel, click that subscribe button. Please click the bell. When you click that bell, you should, for the most part, get notifications whenever I post a video. I just dropped a link in the description to the Discord, or that was to this video. So that's a bit weird. Sorry. I'm going to drop another link to the Discord. If you want to join the Discord, it is a great one that you guys can... let me see right here. Let me put this in the link here. And you guys can join the Discord. It's great for chats. Again, I do these every week, 8 o'clock to about 10:30 or so here on YouTube. I sometimes do additional streams, like I did last night to cover the election results. When debates start happening, I'll be doing extra streams and those sorts of things. If you want to support the channel, again, the biggest thing you guys can do is what you're already doing. Watch my content. I really appreciate it. When you watch a video, it does generate ad revenue, but it also just YouTube signals that this is a good video and it shows it to more new people that may in turn become fans of the channel. You can support the channel like a lot of you guys did tonight by, asking super chat questions. But also if you want to support the channel, you can do so through Patreon, which is or joining the channel here on YouTube, which gives a monthly recurring thing, or you can give one-time donations via PayPal if that's more your speed. A couple of things just before we go. One, Ben says to read Gaius Publius, "The revolution will not go away." We should all read that article. Thanks, Ben, for all your support. I'm going to certainly go and read that. Thanks for your super chats tonight. Also, somebody asked why I have 2 books of Trudeau-mania here. I have it because when you review books, you get copies, and I reviewed it for more than one source. And some of the books I have back here, like I have multiple copies of a book here, as well. So that's why sometimes I have doubles, because, you get them through academia. So guys, have a great one. For those who don't know, Discord is basically like a chat for this YouTube channel, but it's not. It's like sort of just whenever you're on. We post videos there. We'll have good conversations there. It's pretty fun. So be sure to join that thing up. I think it's pretty easy to join. Click that link and it'll just take you right to the Discord. Okay, guys, have a good one. Yes, Smokey's the cat. We had him on earlier, but right now he's sleeping. I will see you next week, and I will see you with a new video, likely pretty much every day, often multiple times a day. Have a good one, guys.